Hi, everyone. We're excited to present our paper Regulating ChatGPT and Other Large Generative AI Models at ACM FAC 2023. In fact, the last couple of weeks and months have seen not only tremendous breakthroughs in the technical domain concerning generative AI systems, but also in the political process. Generative AI is the main obstacle that is responsible for the European AI Act not being enacted yet. And the last days, in fact, have seen a breakthrough at the political level in the European Parliament. Now, we will try to map out some of the main regulatory challenges with respect to generative AI in this short presentation, starting with model regulation and a short glimpse at the European AI Act, then moving over to content regulation and the Digital Services Act, which we think is the perhaps even more important topic. In a third step, we will briefly touch on data protection and the GDPR before we sketch out some policy proposals at the very end. So let's get started with some thoughts on the European AI Act. And in fact, what we have here is a new provision that was just built into a compromise in April 2023 in the European Parliament that specifically addresses what is now called in the legal text a foundation model. What is a foundation model? Well, it is a term that is taken over from the computer science literature, actually from the group of Percy Liang and Stanford, and is defined as an AI model that's trained on broad data at scale, designed for generality of output, and can be adapted to a wide range of distinctive tasks. We believe actually that this term is much better suited than the more vague and loose term of general purpose AI systems to capture the essentials of ChatGPT, Palm 2, and Luminous and other systems that we're here talking about. And so we think that this is actually a good step forward, but we should also mention that foundation models generally cover the large generative AI models that we will be talking about during this presentation. So now, what does the European Parliament version say about foundation models? It has a number of fairly useful formats and regulatory layers, but there's one major point that could potentially derail AI development and deployment in the EU and elsewhere, and that is a comprehensive risk management system. So what the European Parliament envisions is that a foundation model that can be used, of course, for all kinds of different purposes in high-risk scenarios, such as employment, medicine, credit scoring, law enforcement, and so on, that the model itself, or the developers of the model, they have to engage in a risk assessment and mitigation exercise and design a risk management system for all possible high-risk purposes with respect to fundamental rights, health, safety, the environment, democracy, and the rule of law. Now, this is, of course, laudable, but it becomes really difficult when you think about the potential use cases, thousands of them, of a single model like GPT-4 in all of these different areas with respect to all of these different high-risk settings. So we believe that, in a nutshell, in the AI Act, and still with the European Parliament version, and much more even so with the version of the European Council that was passed in December 6, 2022, we have a severe risk of overregulation. And that is problematic because already we have a fairly concentrated market with only Microsoft and Google really competing for the largest shares in the West, at least. And if we have such a comprehensive risk management system for thousands of hypothetical use cases, the risk is that the compliance costs will be nearly prohibitive for SMEs trying to bring their own models onto the market and using them in the EU. So that is one pain point. And the other problem, we believe, is that the real issue with large generative AI systems and the real danger lies in disrupting our democratic discourses, in automating hate speech campaigns and fake news. We've already seen cases where a law professor was accused by ChatGPT of sexual harassment, totally without foundation. And hence here we believe the regulation is truly out of focus, because instead of looking at the AI Act, we should much rather look more specifically at the Digital Services Act in the EU and at other regulation curbing automated or curbing hate speech more generally and fake news around the world. And this is what the second part of the presentation will be on.
And we will take these two images to further illustrate the dangers of AI-generated content and how it can deceive us. One image shows a fake mugshot of Donald Trump, and one can easily imagine how such images could be used in political campaigns. The other image shows the Pope in a very flashy down coat, and this image did go viral for some days until people became aware it was not a picture of a real incident, but AI generated. And to stem the tide of such fake news and misinformation online, the EU has recently enacted a regulatory instrument, the Digital Services Act, or DSA. Its goal is to mitigate harmful speech online and to balance freedom of expression and information at the same time. And to do so, it regulates intermediary services and uses several regulatory techniques. In particular, it requires notice and action mechanisms, the registration of trusted flaggers, and for very large online platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, compliance and risk management systems. However, these rules do not apply to LGame-generated content per se. The DSA only applies to intermediary services, which can be mere conduit services, caching services, or hosting services. For LGames, only the last category could theoretically be relevant. However, LGames provide content themselves, so they are not hosting services. And so the DSA does not apply to LGames per se. And hence, in the field of misinformation and harmful speech, while we have an instrument, it does not apply, and we see a risk of under-regulation.
So the third regulatory field that we have to cover is data protection law. And that topic is mostly covered by the technical report that is attached to our paper. And in recent days, it has gained quite a lot of media attention due to the Italian Data Protection Authority banning ChatGPT from Italy. And ChatGPT raises several data protection issues because it processes personal data first for training the data set or for compiling the data set where it scrapes data from the internet. And later on, when they also process the prompts that users enter, especially when collecting the training data, the data subjects must be informed under certain circumstances, which raises issues. And then the most crucial issue of all is all processing of personal data in the EU requires a legal basis, and it's just not very certain on which legal basis one can rely on when building such a model. And furthermore, in Italy, there was a problem with the protection of minors. And at the moment, ChatGPT has made some concessions to the Italian regulators that allowed ChatGPT to be used in Italy at the moment. But the big questions have not been resolved, and we touch upon them in our technical report.
Thank you, Marco. And there's certainly more research necessary concerning specifically the GDPR dimensions of OpenAI's and other generative AI systems. I believe would be a good way to structure the debate is to look at three different levels of regulation when it comes to foundation models or LGames. So the first one should be minimum standards that apply to all LGames, basically standards that the developers themselves, like OpenAI, like Google, or DeepMind, have to fulfill. And that goes beyond the mere of EU and other laws. Of course, the GDPR applies and non-discrimination law applies, but we also think that there should be certain transparency rules that we spell out in the paper, that moreover, there should be selected data governance duties, such that the training data set, for example, is not only composed of white middle-aged males such as ourselves, and also cybersecurity provisions, which of course have become increasingly important in the contested geopolitical environment of the moment. All of these minimum requirements that we've talked about until here are actually addressed and in the latest European Parliament proposal. But there's one that is specifically missing, and that is the expansion of content moderation of the DSA framework that we've seen with trusted flaggers and notice and action mechanisms that ensure that developers have to react if, for example, users find out that certain prompts actually lead to output of how to manufacture a biological bomb or how to generate a dialogue between Hitler and Goebbels with illegal content. These rules have not been transposed to large generative AI models, and here we see a real danger and an absolute need for action. The second level then are use case specific rules. If you take these models, adapt them, and use them in specific high-risk use cases, medicine, employment, you name it, then we believe, but only then, you should be required to conduct a risk management assessment and to implement risk management systems for this specific mechanism and use case. And finally, we need rules for the AI value chain. And this is also something that is contemplated in the European Parliament Act or version, whereby we mean that none of the actors, the original developers, such as OpenAI, any deployers in between that fine-tune the model for specific use cases, and professional users, none of them usually have all the information necessary for full EU AI compliance. And hence here we need access and information rights that at the same time respect, of course, to a certain extent, trade secrets and IP rights. We also, going forward, need sustainability rules, but time's up already. And we'd like to thank you for your attention and look forward to the discussion and to the new developments that we will certainly see, not only in the technical, but also in the regulatory field concerning generative AI. Many thanks.